I think we'll let people kind of trickle in, but we can go ahead and get started with some announcements. Good morning, afternoon. I'm Central, so it's still morning here. My name is Stephanie Alger, for anyone who doesn't know me. I'm a member of the Moo Dig Steering Committee, and I'm really excited for today's presentation. Today we have Caitlin Perry from the IIIF Coalition here to tell us exactly what IIIF is and how it can be used in digital publications. Before we jump into that, though, I just wanted to make a couple of announcements. One, this meeting is being recorded. It will be available on our YouTube channel, so if you want to send it to colleagues or rewatch it yourself, it'll be there. Number two, we have a freshly redesigned website. We sent an email about it last month. If you didn't get that email, make sure to sign up for our email list. We won't spam you. We send about one email a month just to give notifications about upcoming meetings. On the website, you can find links to our past webinars with short descriptions, best practices for promoting your digital publications, and a list of articles and resources relevant to our field, along with a database of digital publications. If you don't see your publications on there, there's a link to add them to that list, and we'd be happy to put it on there. Lastly, our next meeting is scheduled for November 12th with the team from the Mapping Dutch Art in U.S. Museums project. We'll be joined by Christopher Atkins, Alyssa Trejo, and Elizabeth Matthews for that presentation. So make sure to join that email list and get that notification. Alrighty, I think that's all of the housekeeping. So I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin for her presentation. If you have any questions while she's talking, feel free to pop them in the chat or just hold them till the end. We'll have some time for a little bit of Q&A at the end. All right.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Caitlin Perry. I am the Communications and Community Coordinator for the IIIF Consortium, which means that I work with a small staff, our Managing Director, Martin Kalfatovic, and our Technical Coordinator, Glenn Robson, to support the work of the IIIF Consortium. So while I am getting my slides prepped, if you wouldn't mind, on a scale from 1 to 5, how familiar are you with the IIIF Consortium? And I would say 1 is, I have no idea what the I's stand for, and 5 is, I have already seen you give this presentation before. And if you could put that in the chat, that would be great. Okay, awesome. There's at least one in here, which is good because my first couple slides are literally just about what the I's stand for. So we will get in there. Okay, so what is the IIIF Consortium, or what is IIIF? So IIIF is an acronym, and the acronym stands for the International Image Interoperability Framework. So it's clear probably to all of you why we don't say that, and we just say IIIF instead. And the official definition for IIIF is that it's a set of open standards that help archives and libraries and museums and other cultural heritage institutions host and share digitized collections. Oh, that was odd. All right, guys. Okay, are we back in action?
Yeah, you can see the tab at the top, but I think it's fine.
Okay, as long as the tab's fine. No one's seeing the mess of my background, that's fine. Okay, so I'll go back to that. So the IIIF is a set of open standards that help cultural heritage institutions share digitized collections, and it helps users and researchers find and interact with those collections. And it does so by erasing the boundaries between digital collections at various institutions. To make this possibly more difficult, when we are talking about IIIF, sometimes we're kind of talking about two things interchangeably. So we're talking about the technology, we're talking about the model for presenting and annotating content, such as images, audiovisual files, 3D objects, and then sometimes we use IIIF to talk also about the global community that helps develop those open APIs, implements the software, develops the ecosystem of tools that allow people to interact with them, and helps expose the interoperable content. If I were stuck in an elevator with any of you, instead of having you as a captive audience for the next hour, I would say that IIIF is a solution for managing and sharing images and metadata. Okay. So I've given you the definition, but why do we need it? So the diagram here is a representation of how a good deal of image delivery currently works. So cultural heritage institutions like museums and libraries have done really heroic work over the last few decades to digitize and make available their content and collections. A lot of that really ramped up during COVID when people couldn't be in person. But that work is happening at the institutional level. So each of these different institutions is working to host their digital images on their own servers, they're managing their data in their own catalogs, and then they're delivering the assets via bespoke apps or their own websites or curatorial displays. So this creates a problem. One is it's really expensive for the institutions. Everyone is reinventing the wheel and rebuilding infrastructure at their own institution, and they're recreating work that other places have already done. It's also really annoying for end users. So let's say I'm a researcher and I am doing a project on a particular artist. Let's say I want to do something on Bierstadt, and I know that the Yale Art Museum has some work there, but I also know that the National Gallery has some there, and I want to be able to look at both of them. My option is to either download enormous files from each of the websites, if that's even available to me, or I have to go through each of their built-in image viewing apps, or I have to, even worse, possibly work with each institution individually to get access to a collection if it's not on display. So IIIF is a solution to this, and how it does that. What IIIF does, it essentially wraps each of the images in these institutions in a little bit of JSON. So the JSON is code. It is uniformly agreed upon by each of these institutions, and it creates a little wrapper around each of the images that houses all of their metadata along with the image itself. So we call that wrapper the manifest, and I think it's a pretty elegant metaphor. Just like a ship or a plane's manifest would tell a person, the crew and the passengers and the cargo on a particular vessel, the manifest wraps around the digital object, and it gives you all the pertinent metadata around it. So once each of these, we're looking at paintings and manuscripts here in this image, but once each of these digital objects is wrapped up in the manifest, it's ready to move seamlessly through an ecosystem of tools and websites. And each of those tools and websites that are developed by people in the IIIF community is where a lot of the magic happens. And it's the most exciting part of this presentation. So what we'll do now is we're going to go through some of the use cases for what you can do with digital objects that are made available via IIIF. And we're going to look at what IIIF enables and what some of those tools are. So we're going to go through kind of a gift spree, and I'm going to show you lots of videos and demos, and then we'll go back to the technical part a little bit at the end, unless anyone objects and is like, I can't do that. Please don't tell me any more about JSON. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to look at is a pretty common need among institutions, which is the ability to make really large items available for people to view. So what we're looking at here is a Japanese tax map, and this is housed at Stanford University libraries, and the real object is enormous. The idea of this map is that you would lay it on the floor and you could stand in the middle, and that's how you would interact with it. You would see it in the round. So for scale, when this GIF zooms out, you can see a guy on the side. He's a real person. His name is Wayne. He works at Stanford University Libraries. He is 6'4". So this map, the real map, is about 2 Waynes by 3 Waynes. And the more technical explanation of how large the map is that it's a composite we're looking at of 158 individual images, and it totals almost 35,000 by 23,000 pixels. The file size is 1.25 gigabytes. So it's enormous. It's a huge file. IIIF allows for just enough of the image to be delivered to a viewer, going from the whole image down to just a part that they're zooming in on, without the user having to download that enormous image. In a technical sense, it's solving the problem of how to make this huge file available, but it also is allowing the end user to view the entirety of a map in high resolution. And it recreates the physical experience that a person would have had by standing in the middle of the map. Of course, we would never allow this with delicate archival materials, so this facsimile is kind of the best that we can do. Okay. IIIF 2. So we just looked at a problem of a single institution delivering one piece of archival material, but the uniformity of the IIIF delivery system allows for multiple items to move together and help enable research. So what we're looking at here is an image that's in the Leiden collection, and the ecosystem tool that we're viewing here is called a curtain viewer. So what we saw before was a more straightforward viewer that allows you to zoom in and out on an image. This one is allowing you to compare multiple images and layer them on top of each other. So what a user can do in this instance is simultaneously explore via deep zoom regions of an image, and you can look at the image in natural light. We can look at it under infrared light and under X-ray. Okay. And that comparison is for three views of one object in the same collection. But because these are uniform, items don't have to be in the same collection for users to interact with them at the same time. So what we're looking at here is a medieval manuscript, and some point after it was finished in 1460, someone cut out all of the illuminated images in here, the illuminations, and sold them separately from the manuscript itself. Some point within the 20th century, the miniatures were acquired by the Royal Library in Paris, and the manuscript itself lives in the National Library of France. So this map just shows that these places are not too far apart. They're separated by the Seine, but because they're in two separate institutions, they might as well be in separate parts of the globe in terms of researching them. A person who wanted to see them both would have to travel from one place to another. They're not geographically far apart, but it's a world of difference. But because both of these institutions use IIIF, there was a way to reignite them in a viewer here. So Biblissima, this is a French research institution, has built a viewer that allows you to see the illuminations where they would have been within the manuscript. So a researcher can look at this manuscript and see it the way that it was meant to be seen. Okay. So another research use case is annotation of images. So we're looking at them, but if you wanted to share these images with other people that you are working with or with students, you might want to be able to annotate them. So what we're looking at here is the Glycerin annotation workspace. This allows you to take a IIIF image from any institution, upload it, and if you'll see, you can highlight particular parts of the image, create an annotation there, and you can share that with others. And then I love this guy's hair. Annotations provide lots of other opportunities. So, one person or a classroom full of people can annotate images and work on them together. but there's lots of ways to use annotation for much larger and bolder projects. So what we're looking at here is a project from the National Library of Wales. They had an enormous collection of photographs, but they didn't know who was in them or what the context was for lots of these photographs. So what they did was make them available to the community and asked for community helpers to come in, say, I know who this person is, and annotate them and work collaboratively to develop metadata for their collections. They've also done this with transcription. So they have a lot of letters and objects in their collection that are in Welsh, and the work of transcribing handwritten Welsh is pretty challenging. And they were able to get people from the community to volunteer their time and help to work on that project. Okay. So another tool in the ecosystem we have guided storytelling tools. Sometimes we call them scrolly telling because you can just scroll through and see annotations on different images. The one that I'm going to play here, this is from MWAL, which is an Italian firm. And unless you read Italian, you may not be able to see what the annotations say, but they are guiding students through images and pointing out the areas that they want them to see with context and information. So this guide is of a single image, and someone has gone through and made notes about it. But there's also another example here that I'm going to show. This is a tool called Exhibit, and this example is from Dorothy Berry at Harvard. Oh. And this is taking in items from different institutions to build a curatorial object that explains what people are seeing. So it enriches a research project with items from different collections. And then Dorothy was able to add context and information to each of these and provide a really immersive learning experience for folks. Okay. So additional context that you might want to apply to objects in your institution are mapping. So what we're looking here is a proof of concept for all maps, which is software that allows you to take historical maps that might be in your collection and then geo-reference them over Google Maps or another gazetteer to see what those maps look like on the context of the places that you know. So you'll see here, we're looking at a historical map. You can see a Google map here, and you can overlay them. Okay. And I'm going to hope that I put the sound up for this one. So the items that IIIF allows you to share interoperably don't have to be static images. We're going to look at here an audiovisual example. Can we hear it? No. Oops, sorry. Okay, I'll play it for you, and I'll send a link if anyone wants to look at it. But what they've done here is they've taken an audiovisual example of someone playing a piece of music that exists in a collection, and then highlight the music in real time on a piece of sheet music that they also collect. And you can time these things to work together. Okay. So I'm going to pause the gift party for a minute to talk a little bit about the technical side of IIIF and what is actually happening in the back end to make all of these use cases possible. So the way that IIIF works at a base level is through APIs, which are application programming interfaces. And at base, an API is just an agreement between two parts of a system or between different systems that data is going to go one way and out another way and allow you to switch out different pieces. So this enables image delivery and reduce costs. But the example we're looking at here is, you have an item in your repository. We wrap it in that manifest, in that JSON wrapper, and then that item can go seamlessly from a third-party app like the exhibit storytelling tool or through to a curtain viewer, or if it's a map, it could go into all maps and that would be fine. It could go into an annotation environment, and there's no additional work that you have to do to make those objects work. But the real richness of IIIF, the full power of IIIF, comes into play because lots of institutions are doing this. So because data store 1, and this might be Getty, data store 2 might be the National Gallery, data store 3 might be the V&A, all have their items in their digital repositories. They're being wrapped in the same uniform manifest. And then these things can kind of cross paths all over the ecosystem. So like the example I showed from Harvard that Dorothy Berry made on the Emancipation Proclamation, you could take items from different locations and piece them into these tools seamlessly. Okay, a little more than I promised, not too much more about APIs. So there's 2 core APIs that underpin this. One we call the image API. This is just the part that delivers the pixels. This is what allows the deep zoom of that tax map. And then the other is the presentation API, which allows for metadata and context and other items to come through. So what that looks like when you're looking at an object, we have a picture of a sculpture here. The image of the sculpture, that is the image API, and then all of this metadata on the side, that's the presentation API. And those things work together to give you this really rich viewing experience. There are other APIs that allow you to do more with IIIF. We have things like the search API, which allows if you have something like a manuscript or a text for viewers to search through it. Authorization, which might sound challenging. Why would you make things interoperable and then want to put limits on it? But we realize that there are institutions that have objects that are sensitive, or maybe are under copyright, where you may not want people to download them, even though you're going to allow them to deep zoom on them. And it allows you to put up guardrails there. Content state and change discovery are helpful for research purposes. They allow you to share like a particular view, zoomed in on one part of an image and share that with someone else, or to view the life cycle of changes that have happened for an image in a repository. Okay, that's it on the text side. We can get back to it if people have questions. I talked earlier about how sometimes we say IIIF to mean the community, and IIIF is an open standard, but what we don't have is a paid group of people who are maintaining the standard. The power of IIIF really comes from the community of people who are behind it. So here's a nice big photo of the last big community meetup in Los Angeles. Our annual conference was hosted by UCLA and Getty in June. And here's a nice picture of all of us. This group is made up of developers and implementers, researchers and educators, curators, librarians, archivists, digital technologists, and all sorts of folks in the GLAM sector. The community is made up from people who are touching these digital objects over their whole life cycle. So the people who are implementing the APIs and doing that technical work, curators and librarians and archivists who are building out the displays using the tools that we showed you, and also lots of educators and folks who are doing research and making reuse of those objects. Okay, this map is a current representation of where we know that there is IIIF implementations. The blue dots are member institutions, so institutions who are part of the consortium, but you don't have to be part of the IIIF consortium to be a part of IIIF. So anyone who is making their collections available via IIIF goes on the map. And because it's open, people don't have to tell us that they're using IIIF. You know, almost every week someone's telling me, oh, I found a new place that's using IIIF. Can you please put it on the map for me? We talked a lot about IIIF in the context of cultural heritage institutions, and that really is the backbone of the IIIF community. But there's lots of context outside of libraries, archives, and museums. We have seen a lot of folks who are using IIIF resources and teaching people how to find them, mostly in post-secondary, but also in high school settings. We didn't talk too much about AI and machine learning. Maybe we can talk about that during the Q&A, but there are folks who are working on AI and machine learning use cases for IIIF resources. And then a fair amount of STEM use. So people who are using the IIIF standard to help share things like biomedical imaging and things like that. So this is a very non-comprehensive list of some of the leaders in IIIF adoption. The museums and galleries might be particularly interesting to you, but there's lots of state and national libraries, universities and research institutions and museums who are really underpinning a lot of the work that we're doing. These are just a few examples, and they're all institutions and companies, but you don't need to be part of an institution to be part of IIIF. And we do have a few people who are completely unaffiliated with institutions, but just like the idea of sharing cultural heritage items and want to be involved. So the community is made up of lots of volunteers and then 3 staff members at the bottom. The first are community groups. These are kind of like communities of practice or affinity groups for people who are using IIIF in specific contexts like museums or MAPS use cases. We have technical specification groups who are people who want to extend the IIIF APIs for new and expanding use cases. We have an editor group, and the editors are the folks who manage the APIs, write them, and approve them for release. We should have a new release of the APIs coming out in June of 2025. We're governed by a volunteer executive committee. And then, as I said earlier, there are 3 staff members that try and manage all of this. Any of these meetings are open. So the picture here is our community calendar. If you would like to come to a museums meeting and see what kinds of things people in museums are doing with IIIF, you just have to go to the community calendar down here and grab the Zoom link there. They're open to all. So I talked about museums. We also have community groups for 3D. The next version of the IIIF specification coming out next year should have 3D built in, so you'll be able to use the APIs for 3D specification for 3D use cases as well. AI and machine learning, we have an AV group, education, maps, museum, and outreach. The technical specification groups that I said, they help expand the IIIF specifications with their technical needs. These are what we have going on now, but as new use cases come up, new technical specification groups spin up. And then the consortium. So this is the group where we have membership, and what the consortium does with those membership fees and what the staff works to support are the community and technical specification groups. We run an annual conference. This year will be in Leeds, England, hosted by the University of Leeds, plus an online meeting, which is happening November 12th through 14th. We support grant projects, some run by the consortium, but we also help with grant projects from other institutions to expand their use cases of IIIF. We have a cookbook of best practices, which is basically shortcuts to fixing your IIIF problem using code that someone else already developed. We do training opportunities. We have a 5-day training for folks who want to get started with IIIF that happens quarterly. We also do training for curators and researchers on how to find IIIF resources and what you can do with them. And we do trainings in different languages as well, because we are an international group. And though English is the main language of the IIIF Consortium, we try to build out resources that are useful for folks all across the globe. And then the consortium also supports travel scholarships and event support for people to come and attend events. So if you are, I've convinced you that your institution needs to get involved in IIIF, you could certainly join the consortium, and we would welcome that. But I would say if you as an individual are interested in learning more about IIIF, there's lots of really low effort ways to get involved. The first is to join a call. So we have a community call, much like this, that happens every month on a different implementation or technical problem. Those happen on the third Wednesday of every month. We have a newsletter. You can subscribe to that. I send it out 10 times a year. You won't get spammed with it. And then the IIIF Slack is a free community to sort out your problems or see what other people are doing. There's about 2,500 people in there, and there's a lot of people who are so happy to answer people's questions about IIIF. So with that, I am going to stop sharing, and then we'll see if we have questions.
I can pass
Stephanie.
them from the chat if you want. Or
Yeah, I was going to ask. I'm happy to read through them, or if you want to curate them.
I can read this one out loud for folks and
Okay.
then answer it. So this is from Jessica. She says, and she asked this during sort of a little bit of the technical, when you're talking about some of the more technical details. She says, if I'm creating an online publication that uses images from many different organizations, am I creating creating and storing local versions of those resources, like downloading those files, or are linking to existing things elsewhere?
So you're essentially linking to existing things elsewhere. So what you would do is take the manifest and a link to the manifest. And what might be helpful is if I showed you a manifest link. So since we have a little time, do you mind if I do a demo on the fly here? Okay. Hold on, I'm just going to get an item, and I'll show you how to generally how to find a manifest and then what that looks like. Okay. So I'm sharing my screen. What we're looking at is a website for the Art Institute of Chicago. So you can see their image here. And if you scroll down, it's a little different for every institution how they display this. But if you scroll down through the descriptive metadata, you'll see IIIF manifest down here. This link is to the manifest, and I will show you, no one scream, what the manifest looks like. This is not too bad. But this is not useful to you in this context. But what you can do is take this manifest link, and then if we go to an ecosystem tool, so let's go to the universal viewer. This is just a viewer for seeing IIIF resources. You paste that URL here, and now we can see it. And you can see all of the metadata came across with it. And this is generally how it works for other tools in the ecosystem. So if you were building a publication using something like Exhibit or one of these guided storytelling tools, you would just paste that URL into whatever their user interface looks like. And this is how the image will show up. So you don't have to host it locally. It's still hosted by the Art Institute of Chicago, but it's coming and being generated on the fly for viewers. Okay. Did that answer your question, Jessica?
Yeah, it did for the most part. I mean, I assume there are lots of organizations that have images from their collections database publicly online, but don't yet have it connected to a IIIF manifest.
Mhm.
So in those instances, I assume it would be if my publication wanted to use a IIIF version of it, it would be incumbent on us to host that manifest if the organization is not doing it.
If you,
But
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
I would say, yes, if you needed to have a manifest, you wanted to generate one, then you would have to do it yourself.
Got it.
But I said, as we're trying to build out the community of institutions, that should, the ideal is that becomes less of an issue for users.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, so do you want me to ask the next one? I can read it out. So I understand how IIIF can benefit a user, but if I'm a user and don't know what IIIF is, how can I find and use materials that are available across organizations? Yeah, I mean, that's a core problem, is if you don't know what IIIF is, what use is it to you? The institution is still benefiting from having that presentation API in place so that they can, reduce effort and work on their server by facilitating this kind of deep zoom and downloading only a part. But it's not particularly useful for end users. So I would say one thing that we've done as a consortium in the last maybe 18 months, 2 years, is try and make a move away from what the consortium was like, which was very techy and very being guided by the implementers. So the people who saw the value in this and who were building out the infrastructure in their institutions, and trying to make it a more inclusive home for those people who are researching and educating and using the resources, because the promise is there, but if people aren't reusing and resharing and remixing the resources that are available via IIIF, then we've only made it kind of halfway. So part of that is doing outreach events like this. So coming to things and telling people this is what IIIF is. Maybe you already have it at your institution, but also spinning out groups like our outreach group and our educators group to introduce IIIF resources to people before they're getting into the heavy work of researching. So our education group works with undergrads to let them get their feet wet a little bit with using IIIF resources and understanding the ecosystem. The other thing that's really helpful is when institutions make the IIIF manifest visible to people. If you're interested enough to scroll down and see all of the associated metadata with a piece of art, then you might wonder, what is IIIF? Like what is that in the metadata? What does that mean for me? And that's something where we have some mixed implementation. Okay. So I'm interested in how individual artists are using this tool and if there is a resource that gathers some of these examples of their work. So I am not super familiar with like a current living artist working and building out things with IIIF. We have some folks who use things from their personal collections. And one thing that has been really helpful is that the Internet Archive adopted IIIF last year, which made every single item in the Internet Archive's digital images IIIF compliant. So you as a user can, even if you don't have your own server to store your images and then generate manifests on your own, you can certainly create a collection within the Internet Archive and they'll create a manifest for you. And then there's a whole bunch of tools that would allow you to build out a curatorial experience of someone's work. Okay. How would you find a list of tools in the ecosystem? At least one thing I'll do, and I won't make you watch me do this now, is we have a link on the website of all sorts of tools, the tools that we know about. It's shocking to me that, like, I would say once a month, someone is like, oh, look at this cool thing that I built that allows you to look at like Victorian wallpaper in HDR with IIIF, so you can see it in the color that it was in 1898. There's people who are building these things just for funsies. So it's a growing list. The other thing that we have that's really useful is something called the IIIF Awesome List. It's on GitHub. You don't need to be on GitHub to like access this list, but it has a huge almost exhaustive list of like tools and implementations and cool examples of things that people have done with IIIF. And I'll put that up in the chat in just a minute. I see Daniel put the viewers up there. What is the lift skill set needed to create manifests for collection objects? Okay. This can really run the gamut. So if you need, it depends on what technology you have at your disposal. So there are a lot of dam systems that will just do this for you. And sometimes it's a matter of just turning it on in your implementation of your dam system. So you can upload items there. When you ingest them, a manifest is automatically created. If you needed to create this from scratch, you would need some technical support likely from inside your institution to get the server set up, someone who's going to be able to become conversant in the APIs and get you set from there. It kind of depends on the size of the institution. So it probably doesn't come as a surprise that places like Harvard and Stanford have whole teams that build all of this up, and build their own viewers, and they're dedicated to doing this in-house. And then we have lots of smaller institutions that just are reliant on their dam system to make their collections IIIF compliant. So the lift and the skill set kind of depends on how much your institution wants to do. Okay. I'm going to skip the Journal of Historians of Netherlandish Art, though now I'm curious who wrote it, because we have a lot of great uptake on IIIF in the Netherlands. Okay, Gina, I have licensed for a IIIF environment, and the upfront education I have to do for requesting this licensing can be substantial. Can you talk about how Open API for Institutions allows for control around licensing restrictions on images? Are there also protections against training AI platforms? Whew, we could talk about this for a long time. Gina, I don't want to put you on the spot. Are you saying that you have a IIIF environment that requires licensing, or you have to, or people need to do education to receive the license to view the items? There is a way for you to control around restrictions on images. It's the API, the authorization flow that I touched on very, very, very briefly. Basically, if you have limits in place on your website, you can build that in kind of like an SSO with the IIIF manifest. So if someone needs to sign in to be able to access IIIF material, that's something that you can do on the back end. And then in terms of protections against AI training platforms, this is coming up a lot within the community. And if it's something that you're really interested in, I would say it would be probably pleasantly surprising to see the conversations that are coming up within our AI ML community group. Because there's two sides to this. So there's lots of folks who don't want their IIIF content to be used in large language models and things like that. And there's a suggestion that within the manifest, we could put in a tag that would denote that the items are not licensed for ingest into AI platforms. It's not set now. Someone's working on that as an option for people. But the other side of that coin is that there are lots of people who use IIIF resources with AI tools who find them helpful. So there are lots of HTR and transcription tools that people have found do a better job than people of transcribing manuscripts and old letters, and they want to be able to use those tools for IIIF resources. Same thing for descriptive metadata. So I don't know what will happen in future versions of the IIIF spec. My guess is we'll probably have that option for people to tag their work so that it's not ingested. But there's enough positive use cases for AI tools that people want to maintain that it would never become the default.
I have a question for you, Caitlin.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the Nelson Atkins, we use IIIF in our digital publications, but we've only uploaded the image and we've used like an external, we use Micrio to like create our IIIF images.
Micrio. Yeah.
Is it useful for us to like create those IIIF manifests of like just the image part of it without adding all the metadata, or do we need to add the metadata to make it like a useful application of the?
So I will say internally, we say anyone who's using any part of IIIF is using IIIF, and that's great. So you can use it without the presentation API, but it's not really useful for reuse for other people. So it depends a little bit on what your goals are. So if your goals are, we want to save on server costs and we want people to get this really rich viewing experience with the deep zoom and all of that, you don't need the metadata to do that. If you want your collections to be reused by other people, then having that metadata and having the presentation part of it too is important. But we certainly don't, the British Museum doesn't use the presentation portion. They just have the image portion. It depends on what your institutional needs are. And a lot of the DAM systems do default to just the image only, and you need to ask if you want to have the presentation part available too. Is the majority of the metadata in these tools to do more with the actual data about the artworks, or does asset level metadata ever make it into the manifest? Maybe that is customizable. Yes. So IIIF is completely metadata agnostic. There's no particular format that is required for IIIF. And you can imagine, like, if people are using it in a medical context because they want to share like CT scans with other people, their descriptive metadata is not Dublin Core. But for libraries, they're using what they want. It's basically a list. So there's a metadata tag, and then you can enter whatever metadata items in whatever format works for your institution. So I can't think off the top of my head like who is showing asset level metadata, but you could certainly add it if that was something that you wanted. Okay. Did I miss anyone's questions? Shannon said, as an artist, I'm thinking about installation experiences with images and research in large spaces as video experiences. This seems like it would be an amazing resource. Yeah, I just want to touch on this because there are lots of ways to use IIIF digital resources, even inside of a physical viewing environment. So one thing that we have seen people do is they may have something like a rare manuscript on display, and they've opened it and they're showing you maybe the most beautiful image in the manuscript, but they'll have an iPad or a viewer on the screen that will allow you to go through all of the digitized pages of the manuscript next to it. Things like that. And I would say also with 3D is coming down the pike, that should be, there's a draft specification for 3D images, but we'll also be able to do things like build a virtual reality experience where maybe you are taking in art from other institutions. So we always say the goal here would be like, okay, we've created a VR of a castle, and we've taken all the art that was originally hanging in there that's now in institutions all over Europe, and you can visualize it that way. There's lots of ways to reunify items physically and also kind of metaphysically. Anything else? Let me put the awesome list in here.
Caitlin, would it be all right with you if we share your email address out? for if
Yes,
people have
please.
additional questions after the presentation?
Yes, and I will say, Greg called out the people who really want to get serious about this. The 5-day training you can do on your own is available on the website, and you can do that by yourself at your own pace. We also do one for people who want a little more support or hand-holding. If your institution is already a member of the consortium, you get a discount on it. And my colleague Glenn does that quarterly. We also have lots of trainings recorded and on YouTube. We have one that's specifically for end users, for finding resources, how to use these things like Exhibit, and put things into a viewer, where we don't talk about the APIs at all. So I'm going to put I put the awesome list in here. That's a really great resource for finding viewers and tools and implementations and all sorts of other things. I will also put my email address in here. Email me, find me on Slack, come to my house, whatever works for you.
Thank you so much
welcome.
for this. I know this was so helpful for me. We use IIIF, but I'm still constantly kind of confused by what it is we're doing. So we really appreciate you being here. And I know that this video will be really helpful in the future.
This was great. Yep. Thank you.